The cafeteria at Fort Braxton fell silent as 6 recruits closed in around Staff Sergeant Maya Chen's table. What happened in the next 20 seconds would become legend among the 82nd Training Battalion.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Chen had always been different. Growing up in Sacramento as the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs, she learned early that respect wasn't given, it was earned. Her mother, Elena, had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a fierce protective instinct that she passed down to her daughter. By age 12, Maya was walking her younger brother David to school every morning through neighborhoods where looking weak meant becoming a target. The local community center offered free martial arts classes, and Maya threw herself into them with the intensity of someone who understood that strength was survival. Master Williams, a former Marine who ran the program, saw something special in the quiet girl who never missed a session and always stayed late to perfect her techniques. He taught her discipline, precision, and most importantly, when to use what she learned. "Fighting isn't about anger, Maya," he would say during those after-hours sessions. "It's about control. The moment you lose control, you lose everything." By high school, Maya had earned her black belt in Taekwondo and picked up boxing at a local gym. She wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but she was fast, calculated, and utterly fearless. College wasn't an option. Her family needed her income. So at 18, she made the decision that would change everything. She walked into the Army recruitment office on a Tuesday morning in March and signed her name on the dotted line. Basic training at Fort Benning was supposed to break her down and build her back up. Instead, Maya found herself excelling in ways that made her drill sergeants take notice. She could outrun most of the male recruits. Her marksmanship scores were consistently in the top 5%, and during hand-to-hand combat training, she moved with a fluidity that spoke of years of dedicated practice. But excellence in the military, Maya learned, sometimes came with a price. Not everyone appreciated being outperformed by someone they viewed as an outsider, a woman in what many still considered a man's world. After completing her initial training with honors, Maya was assigned to the 82nd Training Battalion at Fort Braxton, North Carolina. The base was massive, housing over 15,000 personnel, and Maya was one of only a handful of female staff sergeants in her unit. She'd earned her stripes through 2 deployments overseas, where her calm under fire and tactical brilliance had saved lives and commendations. Fort Braxton had its own ecosystem, its own unwritten rules, and its own power structures. The newer recruits looked up to the staff sergeants, but there were always those who tested boundaries, who pushed to see what they could get away with. Maya had dealt with her share of difficult recruits over the years, but she'd always handled situations with professionalism and firm boundaries. The trouble started during her 3rd week at Fort Braxton. A group of recruits from Company Delta had been making comments. Nothing overtly confrontational, just the kind of subtle undermining that was designed to chip away at authority. They were led by a recruit named Jake Morrison, a 22-year-old from Ohio who'd played college football before washing out academically. Morrison had the build and swagger of someone accustomed to being the alpha in any group, and he clearly wasn't comfortable taking orders from Maya. Morrison's crew consisted of 5 other recruits, all cut from similar cloth. There was Brad Hutchinson from Texas, built like a linebacker with an attitude to match. Tommy Rodriguez from New Mexico, whose constant smirk suggested he thought everything was a joke. Kevin Walsh from Boston, whose family had a long military tradition and who seemed to think that gave him special privileges. Danny Clark from Georgia, who followed Morrison's lead in everything. And finally, Marcus Thompson from Detroit, who was the quietest of the group, but whose eyes held a challenging gleam whenever Maya gave instructions. The incidents started small. Equipment would go missing from training exercises Maya supervised. Orders would be followed slowly, with just enough delay to be noticeable but not enough to warrant official disciplinary action. During physical training, the group would cluster together, whispering comments just loud enough for Maya to catch fragments, comments about her size, her authority, her right to be giving them orders. Maya had served in combat zones where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. She'd led missions behind enemy lines and earned the respect of hardened soldiers who cared only about competence and courage. But dealing with this particular kind of institutional challenge required a different approach, one that walked the fine line between maintaining order and avoiding the kind of confrontation that could spiral into something much larger. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in late September. The weather was still warm, with that humid North Carolina heat that made uniforms stick to skin even after the sun went down. Maya had just finished a 14-hour day that included leading a training exercise, completing administrative paperwork, and dealing with a disciplinary issue involving a recruit who'd been caught with contraband in the barracks. She was exhausted, running on coffee and determination when she finally made it to the dining facility for what would be her first real meal of the day. The cafeteria was buzzing with the usual evening crowd, hundreds of personnel grabbing dinner before evening duties or personal time. Maya loaded her tray with the standard fare: meatloaf that looked better than it tasted, mashed potatoes, green beans, and a roll that could double as a weapon if necessary. She found a small table in a corner, deliberately choosing a spot away from the main flow of traffic. Maya valued these few minutes of quiet, the brief respite where she could eat in peace and mentally prepare for the evening's responsibilities. She'd learned to find these small pockets of solitude wherever possible. They were essential for maintaining the mental clarity that leadership demanded. Maya had just taken her first bite when she became aware of movement around her table. She looked up to see Morrison and his crew approaching, their trays in hand but their body language suggesting they weren't simply looking for a place to sit. They arranged themselves in a loose semicircle around her table, close enough that their presence was unmistakably intentional, far enough away that it couldn't immediately be called harassment. The cafeteria's ambient noise continued around them, clinking utensils, conversations, the hum of activity that filled any space where hundreds of people gathered for meals. But Maya felt the subtle shift in atmosphere that came when attention focused on a single point. Other personnel weren't staring outright, but there was an awareness, a sense that something was developing. Morrison set his tray down on the table directly across from Maya, his movements deliberate and confident. The others followed suit, effectively boxing her in. The message was clear without being explicit. This was their moment to establish a different dynamic, to challenge the authority structure that Maya represented. Word traveled fast on military bases, and any sign of weakness would spread like wildfire. The 6 recruits settled into their seats with an air of casual confidence that didn't match the tension Maya could feel radiating from their group. Morrison leaned back in his chair, his posture deliberately relaxed in a way that seemed designed to minimize Maya's authority. The others followed his lead, creating an atmosphere of informal challenge that skirted just barely within the bounds of military protocol. Maya finished chewing her bite of meatloaf and set down her fork with practiced precision. The cafeteria noise continued around them, but she could sense the shift in energy at nearby tables. Other soldiers were beginning to notice the unusual configuration. 6 male recruits clustered around one female staff sergeant in what was clearly not a casual dining arrangement. "Actually, I prefer to eat alone," Maya replied evenly, her voice carrying just enough authority to remind everyone present of the rank structure. Morrison's smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. "Come on, Sergeant, we're all part of the same team here. Besides, this seems like a good opportunity for us to get to know our leadership better." The word leadership carried a subtle emphasis that wasn't lost on Maya. Behind Morrison, Brad Hutchinson cracked his knuckles, a sound that cut through the ambient cafeteria noise like a gunshot. Tommy Rodriguez's perpetual smirk had evolved into something more predatory, while Kevin Walsh sat rigidly upright, his military bearings somehow managing to convey disrespect rather than discipline. Maya's training kicked in, her mind automatically cataloging details with the same precision she'd used during combat operations overseas.
Morrison was approximately 6'2", probably 220 pounds, with the broad shoulders and thick arms of someone who'd spent serious time in the weight room. His hands showed calluses from heavy lifting, and the way he held himself suggested confidence in physical confrontation. Hutchinson was even larger, easily 240, with the kind of bulk that came from both genetics and dedication to building mass. His neck was thick as a tree trunk, and his forearms were covered in tattoos that spoke of a rougher background than his Texas drawl might suggest. He was the enforcer of the group, the one who would escalate things physically if Morrison gave the word. Rodriguez was smaller but wiry, with quick eyes and nervous energy that manifested in constant small movements, tapping fingers, shifting weight, adjusting his position every few seconds. He was likely the fastest of the group, the one who would try to flank or create confusion in any confrontation. Walsh carried himself with the rigid bearing of military tradition, but there was something brittle about his composure, as if he was holding himself together through sheer force of will. His eyes kept darting between Maya and Morrison, waiting for direction, needing someone else to take the lead. Clark was a pure follower. He mirrored Morrison's posture and expressions with the unconscious mimicry of someone desperate to belong. He was dangerous not because of any individual capability, but because he would do whatever Morrison asked without question or hesitation. Thompson was the wild card. He sat quietly, watching everything with calculating eyes that missed nothing. Unlike the others, he seemed genuinely at ease, as if he was simply observing an interesting situation unfold. That made him potentially the most dangerous of the group. Maya had faced down insurgents in Kandahar who were trying to kill her. She'd liked convoy operations through hostile territory where a single mistake could cost lives. She'd earned her combat infantry badge by keeping her head clear and her responses measured under pressure that would break most people. 6 recruits in a military cafeteria didn't intimidate her, but she respected the situation enough to handle it properly.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying the tone she'd used to address subordinates in the field, "you have 30 seconds to find another table before this becomes a disciplinary issue." Morrison leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table in a gesture that brought him closer to Maya's personal space. "We're not doing anything wrong, Sergeant, just having a conversation with a fellow soldier. That's not against regulations, is it?" The challenge was now explicit. Morrison was testing whether Maya would escalate to official channels, write them up, call for backup, make it a formal military matter. He was betting that she wouldn't want to be seen as someone who couldn't handle her own situations, who needed help dealing with recruits. Maya understood the game. If she called for support, word would spread that she couldn't maintain control without assistance. If she backed down, her authority would be permanently compromised. Morrison had engineered a situation with only one acceptable outcome from his perspective. Maya would have to accept their presence and their implicit challenge to her authority. What Morrison hadn't factored into his calculations was Maya's background, her training, and her absolute certainty that backing down was never an option. Other personnel in the cafeteria were now openly watching. Maya could see soldiers at nearby tables turning in their seats, conversations dying mid-sentence as attention focused on their corner of the room. A few staff sergeants from other units had noticed the situation and were evaluating whether to intervene, but military protocol suggested they should wait to see how Maya handled it herself. Captain Sarah Martinez from the base legal office was 3 tables away. Her attention split between her dinner and the developing situation. Maya caught her eye briefly and saw understanding there. Martinez knew what was happening and was prepared to step in if necessary, but she was also giving Maya the space to handle it according to her own judgment. The cafeteria's background noise had diminished noticeably. Food service personnel behind the serving line had slowed their work, sensing the tension even if they couldn't hear the specific conversation. The evening rush was winding down, which meant fewer people moving around, less ambient noise, and more focus on their table. Maya picked up her water glass and took a slow sip. using the moment to center herself. In Kandahar, Master William's voice echoed in her memory. Control the timing, control the outcome. She thought about her brother David, now in college thanks to the money she sent home each month. She thought about the young female recruits in her unit who looked up to her as an example of what was possible. She thought about every person who had ever doubted her right to be here. "Your 30 seconds are up," Maya said quietly. Morrison's expression shifted, the mask of false friendliness finally dropping away to reveal the calculation beneath. "Look, Sergeant, we're not going anywhere. This is a public dining facility, and we have every right to sit here. If you have a problem with that, maybe you should be the one to leave." The words hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Morrison had just openly defied a direct order from a superior officer in front of witnesses. In military terms, this was no longer a gray area or a personality conflict. It was insubordination, pure and simple. Maya stood up slowly, her movement fluid and controlled. She was 5'6" and weighed 130 pounds, smaller than any of the men surrounding her table. But as she rose, something in her bearing changed. The exhaustion from her long day disappeared, replaced by the focused intensity that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments. The 6 recruits remained seated, looking up at her with expressions that ranged from amusement to anticipation. Morrison's confidence was evident in his relaxed posture, his assumption that Maya would ultimately be forced to back down or call for help. Maya took 1 step back from the table, giving herself room to move. Her hands remained at her sides, loose and ready. Her breathing was controlled, her heartbeat steady. Around them, the cafeteria had gone almost completely quiet, hundreds of eyes focused on their corner of the room. Maya said last chance, her voice carrying clearly through the silence. "Move, now." Morrison started to laugh, turning to share his amusement with his crew. "Did you guys hear that? She's giving us orders like we're—" He never finished the sentence. Maya moved like lightning. Her right foot swept Morrison's chair backward while he was still mid-laugh, sending him tumbling to the floor with his arms windmilling for balance. Before he could process what was happening, Maya had pivoted to Hutchinson, who was rising from his seat with the slow reaction time of someone who relied too heavily on bulk over speed. The massive Texan never made it to his feet. Maya's left elbow struck the nerve cluster just below his ear with surgical precision, and Hutchinson dropped like a felled tree, his considerable weight hitting the cafeteria floor with a sound that echoed through the silent room. Rodriguez, true to Maya's assessment, was the quickest to react. He lunged forward with his arms outstretched, trying to wrap Maya in a bear hug from behind. But Maya had anticipated his movement, dropping into a crouch and spinning clockwise as his momentum carried him over her position. Her right leg swept out in a perfect arc, taking Rodriguez's legs out from under him and sending him crashing into an empty table with enough trays and utensils across the floor. The entire sequence had taken less than 5 seconds.
Walsh was backing away now, his military bearing crumbling as he witnessed his larger companions being systematically dismantled by someone half their size. His hand moved toward the radio on his belt. Whether to call for help or simply out of nervous habit, Maya would never know. Her approach closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, and a precise strike to his solar plexus doubled him over, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Clark had frozen completely, his follower mentality leaving him paralyzed without Morrison's leadership to guide him. Maya almost felt sorry for him as she grabbed his wrist and applied just enough pressure to the nerve cluster there to send him sinking to his knees with a shocked expression of pain and confusion. That left Thompson, the quiet observer who had seemed most at ease with the confrontation. Unlike the others, he hadn't moved to attack or retreat. He simply sat in his chair, hands visible on the table, watching Maya with those calculating eyes that had marked him as potentially the most dangerous. Maya positioned herself within striking distance, but didn't advance further. Thompson's stillness suggested either supreme confidence or recognition that resistance would be futile. The cafeteria silence was complete now. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their activities to witness the unprecedented display. "Smart man,"
Maya said quietly, her breathing barely elevated despite the explosive action of the previous seconds. Thompson nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I'll stay right here until you tell me otherwise." Around them, the aftermath of the confrontation was stark. Morrison was pulling himself upright using a table edge, his face flushed with embarrassment and dawning anger. Hutchison was sitting on the floor, shaking his head as if trying to clear fog from his vision. Rodriguez was extracting himself from the wreckage of the overturned table, moving gingerly as he checked for injuries. Walsh was still bent over, taking small, careful breaths. Clark remained on his knees, cradling his wrist against his chest. The entire encounter had lasted less than 20 seconds from first movement to complete resolution. Maya had neutralized 5 trained military personnel without breaking a sweat, using minimal force and maximum efficiency. More importantly, she had done it in front of an audience that would ensure the story spread throughout Fort Braxton within hours. Captain Martinez was the first to move, rising from her table with the careful deliberation of someone who needed to assess a situation before taking official action. As the base legal officer, her response would set the tone for any formal proceedings that might follow. "Staff Sergeant Chen," Martinez called out, her voice carrying the authority of both rank and legal expertise. "Report." Maya came to attention, her posture perfect despite having just engaged in physical combat. 6 recruits refused direct orders to relocate, Captain. When I attempted to enforce compliance, they became physically aggressive. I responded with minimum necessary force to neutralize the threat. The phrasing was precise, clinical, and exactly what military protocol demanded. Maya had documented the encounter in terms that would protect her from potential charges while clearly establishing the recruit's culpability for insubordination and assault. Morrison had regained his feet and was clearly preparing to offer his own version of events. His face was red with humiliation and rage, and Maya could see him formulating explanations that would paint her the aggressor. He opened his mouth to speak, but Martinez cut him off with a gesture. "I witnessed the entire incident, Recruit Morrison," Martinez said, her tone brooking no argument. "Your version of events is neither required nor welcome at this time. You and your companions will report to the military police office immediately for processing." The captain's words carried the weight of legal authority. As a witness to insubordination and assault, she could initiate formal charges that would result in court-martial proceedings. Morrison's anger visibly deflated as the reality of his situation became clear. Master Sergeant Williams had appeared seemingly from nowhere, a skill that senior non-commissioned officers develop through years of managing difficult situations. He surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had seen every possible variation of military discipline breakdown. "Outstanding work, Chen," Williams said, his voice pitched just loud enough for the watching crowd to hear clearly. "Textbook application of force escalation protocols. Clean, efficient, proportional response to direct threat." His words weren't just praise. They were official validation of Maya's actions, spoken by one of the most respected senior enlisted personnel on the base. Williams' endorsement would carry significant weight in any formal review of the incident. The 6 recruits were escorted from the cafeteria by military police who had responded to the disturbance call. Morrison walked with his head down, the swagger completely gone from his bearing. His crew followed in similar fashion, the reality of their situation finally penetrating through their earlier bravado. As they were led away, conversations slowly resumed throughout the dining facility. But Maya could feel the change in atmosphere around her. The glances from other personnel carried a different quality now. Respect mixed with wariness, recognition of capability that demanded acknowledgement. Maya returned to her table and sat down to finish her meal, her appetite unaffected by the confrontation. The meatloaf was still lukewarm, the mashed potatoes still bland, but she ate methodically while her mind processed the implications of what had just occurred. Word would spread quickly through the informal communication networks that existed in every military installation. By morning, every soldier on Fort Braxton would know that Staff Sergeant Maya Chen had single-handedly handled 6 male recruits who had challenged her authority. The story would grow in the telling, but the core facts would remain consistent. Captain Martinez approached Maya's table, her legal pad in hand and her expression professional but not unfriendly. "Sergeant, I'll need a formal statement for the record. Are you available to provide that this evening?" Maya nodded, finishing her last bite of dinner. "Yes, ma'am, I'm at your disposal." "Good, my office in 30 minutes. And Chen?" Martinez paused, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "That was the most impressive display of controlled force I've witnessed in 15 years of military service. Your restraint and precision likely prevented serious injuries while effectively ending a volatile situation." The captain's words carried weight beyond simple praise. They were an official recognition that Maya's actions had been not just justified, but exemplary. In the complex world of military justice, such endorsements could make the difference between commendation and court-martial. As Maya cleared her tray and prepared to leave, she noticed Thompson still sitting at the table where the confrontation had begun. Unlike his companions, he hadn't been escorted away by the military police. His cooperation and non-resistance had apparently earned him different treatment. "Sergeant," Thompson said quietly as she passed his position. "Permission to speak?" Maya paused, evaluating the young man who had shown enough wisdom to recognize when resistance was futile. "Go ahead, recruit." "I wanted to apologize for my association with this incident. Morrison's plan was poorly conceived and executed, and I should have distanced myself from it before it reached this point." The words were carefully chosen and delivered with sincerity. Thompson was clearly intelligent enough to understand the broader implications of the evening's events and mature enough to accept responsibility for his role, however passive. "Your judgment in remaining neutral during the confrontation was noted, Thompson. Learn from this experience and choose your associations more carefully in the future." Thompson nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the guidance." Captain Martinez's office was located in the administrative wing of Fort Braxton, a sterile environment of government-issued furniture and fluorescent lighting that seemed designed to drain emotion from any conversation. Maya sat across from the legal officer's desk, her posture relaxed but alert as she provided her formal statement regarding the cafeteria incident. The recounting took 45 minutes, with Martinez asking detailed questions about timing, positioning, force levels, and Maya's decision-making process throughout the confrontation. Every aspect of the encounter was dissected and documented, creating an official record that would serve as the foundation for any subsequent proceedings. "Your restraint was remarkable," Martinez observed as she reviewed her notes. 6 targets neutralized with no permanent injuries, no excessive force, and minimal collateral damage. Where did you learn to move like that?" Maya considered her response carefully. Military culture valued capability, but there was always the risk that too much detail about her background might be perceived as showboating. "Community center martial arts growing up, ma'am. Some additional training during my overseas deployments." Martinez nodded, making additional notes. "The recruits are being held pending formal charges. Morrison will likely face court-martial for insubordination and assault on a superior officer. The others will probably receive non-judicial punishment under Article 15, depending on their individual levels of culpability." The legal framework was straightforward, but Maya understood that the broader implications extended far beyond formal disciplinary action. The incident would become part of Fort Braxton's institutional memory, affecting how she was perceived and treated by both subordinates and superiors. After completing her statement, Maya returned to her quarters, a small room in the senior enlisted housing that she'd been assigned upon her arrival at Fort Braxton. The space was sparse but functional: a single bed, a desk, a wall locker, and a few personal items that provided minimal comfort in an otherwise utilitarian environment. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from her mother and a series of text messages from her brother David, who was in his junior year studying engineering at UC Davis. Maya smiled as she read his messages, which ranged from updates about his coursework to requests for advice about a girl she was interested in asking out. She called her mother first, knowing that Alana Chen would worry if she didn't hear from her daughter regularly. The conversation was conducted in a mixture of English and Mandarin, with Alana expressing her usual concerns about military life and Maya's safety. "I saw the news about tensions in Eastern Europe," Alana said, her voice carrying the weight of a mother's perpetual worry. "Are you going to be deployed again?" Maya reassured her mother that no deployment orders had been issued, but she knew Elena would continue worrying regardless. The conversation shifted to lighter topics: David's academic progress, Elena's work at the medical supply company, and plans for Maya's next leave period. After ending the call with her mother, Maya contacted David directly. Her brother's enthusiasm was infectious as he described a breakthrough in his senior design project, a water purification system that could potentially serve communities in developing regions. "Maya, you should see this thing work," David said, his excitement evident even over the phone connection. "We're talking about technology that could bring clean water to places that have never had access, all because of what I learned watching you solve problems growing up." The comment caught Maya off guard. She'd never considered that her approach to challenges might have influenced her brother's engineering mindset, but the connection made sense in retrospect. Both siblings had learned to break down complex problems into manageable components and address each element systematically. Their conversation lasted nearly an hour, covering David's classes, his social life, and his growing confidence in his chosen field. Maya found herself energized by her brother's optimism and drive, remembering why she'd chosen military service in part to ensure his opportunities remained open. The next morning brought a summons to Colonel Patricia Hayes' office, the commanding officer of the 82nd Training Battalion and Maya's ultimate superior within the base hierarchy. Hayes was a legendary figure at Fort Braxton, a career infantry officer who had commanded combat operations in 3 different theaters and earned a reputation for both tactical brilliance and unwavering fairness. Hayes's office reflected her personality, functional, organized, and decorated with commendations and photographs from various military operations. The colonel was reviewing a file when Maya entered, her weathered face showing the kind of focused concentration that came from decades of making decisions that affect human lives. "Staff Sergeant Chen, please have a seat," Hayes said without looking up from her paperwork. "I've been reading some interesting reports about your activities yesterday evening." Maya positioned herself at attention until Hayes gestured for her to relax. The colonel's tone was neutral, providing no indication of whether the conversation would result in commendation or censure. 6 recruits, Hayes continued, finally looking up from the file, neutralized in under 20 seconds with no permanent injuries, with minimal disruption to base operations. Captain Martinez describes it as a textbook example of appropriate force escalation. The colonel leaned back in her chair, studying Maya with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating personnel under pressure. Hayes had built her career on reading people accurately, and Maya could feel herself being assessed according to criteria that went far beyond the previous evening's incident. "Tell me about your combat experience, Chen. Your file mentions 2 deployments, but the details are classified above my clearance level." Maya provided a careful summary of her overseas service, focusing on leadership roles and tactical responsibilities while avoiding operational specifics that remained classified. Hayes listened without interruption, occasionally making notes that would presumably become part of Maya's permanent record. "Impressive background," Hayes observed when Maya finished her account. "Special operations support, combat leadership, decorated for valor under fire. No wonder Morrison and his crew chose the wrong target." The colonel's comment carried an undertone of satisfaction, as if she approved of the previous evening's outcome on multiple levels. Hayes had likely dealt with similar challenges throughout her own career and understood the dynamics that had led to the confrontation. "The recruits involved in yesterday's incident will face appropriate disciplinary action. Morrison will be court-martialed and likely receive a dishonorable discharge. The others will remain at Fort Braxton under close supervision while completing their training." Maya nodded, understanding that the colonel's decisions represented both justice for the incident and a message to other personnel who might consider similar challenges to authority. However, Hayes said, her tone shifting slightly, I'm more interested in discussing your future with the 82nd Training Battalion. Your performance here has been exemplary, and yesterday's incident demonstrated capabilities that suggest you're ready for additional responsibilities. The conversation took an unexpected turn as Hayes outlined opportunities for advanced training and specialized assignments that would leverage Maya's unique combination of combat experience and leadership abilities. The colonel described potential roles in special operations training, officer candidate instruction, and inter-service cooperation programs.
There's a position opening up with the Joint Special Operations Command training facility, Hayes explained. They're looking for senior enlisted personnel with your background to develop a curriculum for advanced combat leadership programs. The assignment would be prestigious, challenging, and likely to accelerate your career progression significantly. Maya listened carefully as Hayes described the opportunity, understanding that such assignments were typically offered to personnel being groomed for senior leadership positions. The colonel was essentially offering her a pathway to the highest levels of military service. "I'm honored by the consideration, ma'am," Maya replied. "When would you need a decision?" Hayes smiled, the expression transforming her weathered features and revealing the person behind the command authority. "Take your time, Chen. Opportunities like this don't come along often, and I want you to make the choice that's right for your career and your personal goals." As Maya left the colonel's office, her mind raced with the implications of the conversation. The previous evening's confrontation had apparently opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed, demonstrating how single moments could reshape entire career trajectories. The base was buzzing with activity as Maya walked back to her unit's area. Other personnel who passed her offered nods of acknowledgement that carried a different quality than before. Recognition mixed with respect and perhaps a touch of wariness. Word of the cafeteria incident had clearly spread throughout Fort Braxton, creating a reputation that would follow Maya wherever her military career led her. Thompson was waiting near the entrance to Maya's unit headquarters, his posture suggesting he had something important to communicate. Unlike the previous evening, his demeanor was entirely respectful, with none of the calculated observations that had marked him during the confrontation. "Sergeant Chen," Thompson began, his voice carrying a formality that hadn't been present during their previous interactions. "I wanted to request permission to speak with you about my future at Fort Braxton." Maya gestured for him to continue, curious about what the young recruit had to say. Thompson had distinguished himself by his restraint during the cafeteria incident, showing judgment that separated him from his former associates. "I've been thinking about what happened yesterday, and I realize I made some poor choices in the people I associated with. Morrison recruited me into his group when I first arrived, and I went along because I thought it was easier than standing alone. But watching what happened made me understand that sometimes standing alone is exactly what integrity requires." His words carried the weight of genuine reflection, suggesting that the previous evening's events had prompted serious self-examination. Maya had seen this transformation before, moments of crisis that forced individuals to confront their own values and make conscious choices about their character. "What are you asking for, Thompson?" Maya inquired, maintaining her professional demeanor while recognizing the recruit's apparent sincerity. Thompson straightened his posture, meeting Maya's gaze directly. "I'd like to request a transfer to your training unit, Sergeant. I want to learn from someone who demonstrates the kind of leadership and principle that I saw yesterday. I understand that my association with Morrison's group might disqualify me, but I'm hoping you'll give me the opportunity to prove that I can be better than my previous choices." The request was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. Thompson had demonstrated intelligence and situational awareness that suggested potential for development under proper guidance. His willingness to acknowledge mistakes and seek improvement spoke to character traits that could be cultivated into genuine leadership ability. Maya considered the request carefully.
Taking on Thompson would mean accepting responsibility for his development and vouching for his character despite his recent associations. It would also send a message to other personnel that redemption was possible, even after poor decisions. I'll speak with my unit commander about the possibility, but understand that if you join my training group, the standards will be higher than anything you've experienced so far. I don't accept excuses, I don't tolerate half measures, and I expect every member of my unit to hold themselves accountable for excellence. Thompson nodded eagerly. I understand, Sergeant. I'm ready for that level of expectation. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, the Deputy Commander of Training Operations at Fort Braxton. Patterson was known throughout the base as a demanding but fair officer who had built his reputation on developing elite training programs that produced exceptional soldiers. "Sergeant Chen," Patterson called out as he approached, "I was hoping to catch you. Do you have a few minutes to discuss a special assignment opportunity?" Maya and Thompson came to attention as Patterson approached. The lieutenant colonel acknowledged Thompson with a brief nod before focusing his attention on Maya. "I've been following your career since you arrived at Fort Braxton," Patterson continued. "Your performance metrics are outstanding, your leadership evaluations are exemplary, and yesterday's incident demonstrated tactical capabilities that we don't often see outside special operations units." Maya remained at attention while Patterson outlined an assignment that would involve developing advanced combat training curriculum for incoming Special Forces candidates. The program would combine traditional military tactics with innovative approaches to close-quarters combat and leadership under extreme stress. The position would require you to work directly with some of the most elite personnel in the Army, Patterson explained. You'd be designing scenarios that test not just physical capability, but decision-making, ethical reasoning, and leadership under the kind of pressure that separates exceptional soldiers from merely competent ones. The opportunity represented a significant advancement in Maya's career trajectory, offering exposure to the highest levels of military training and the chance to influence the development of future special operations leaders. It was exactly the kind of assignment that could lead to rapid promotion and eventual selection for senior command positions. Patterson handed Maya a folder containing detailed information about the program requirements and selection criteria. "Take some time to review the materials and let me know your decision by the end of the week. This isn't the kind of opportunity that comes along often, and frankly, you're the only person on base who has the right combination of experience and demonstrated capability." After Patterson departed, Maya opened the folder and began reviewing the assignment details. The program would involve working with candidates from multiple special operations units, designing training scenarios that replicated real-world combat conditions, and evaluating personnel under extreme stress situations. Thompson had remained at attention throughout the exchange, but Maya could see his interest in the conversation. The recruit was clearly intelligent enough to understand the significance of the opportunity being offered to Maya. "At ease, Thompson," Maya said, closing the folder and focusing her attention back on the young soldier. "Your request for transfer is approved, pending completion of the necessary paperwork. Report to Sergeant Williams at 0600 tomorrow for processing into the unit." Thompson's relief was visible as he relaxed his posture. "Thank you, Sergeant. I won't disappoint you." Maya spent the remainder of the morning completing administrative tasks and reviewing training schedules for her current unit. The routine paperwork provided a welcome respite from the intensity of recent events, allowing her to process the various opportunities and decisions that lay ahead. During lunch, she encountered several other staff sergeants who had heard about the cafeteria incident and Patterson's visit. The informal conversations revealed the extent to which her reputation had evolved over the past 24 hours. With colleagues expressing both admiration for her tactical skills and curiosity about her future assignments. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez from the Military Police Unit approached Maya's table with a knowing smile. "I heard Patterson offered you the Special Operations training position," Gonzalez said without preamble. "That's the kind of assignment that puts you on the fast track to senior leadership." Maya had worked with Gonzalez on several training exercises and respected her professionalism and direct communication style. The two women had developed a friendship based on shared experiences as minorities in male-dominated military specialties. "Word travels fast around here," Maya replied, acknowledging the truth of Gonzalez's statement without confirming specific details. Gonzalez sat down across from Maya, lowering her voice to ensure their conversation remained private. "You know that taking that assignment means you'll be under intense scrutiny from people looking for any excuse to question your qualifications. Special operations training is still considered an old boys club by a lot of people, and they'll be watching for you to fail." The warning was delivered with concern rather than discouragement. Gonzalez understood the additional challenges that women faced in advancing to elite military positions and wanted to ensure Maya was prepared for the political dynamics involved. "I've been under scrutiny my entire career," Maya responded. "Yesterday proved that I can handle whatever challenges get thrown my way." Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Gonzalez's warning remained in Maya's mind as she considered the implications of accepting Tatterson's offer. The position would provide unprecedented opportunities for career advancement, but it would also place her in an environment where any mistake could be magnified and used to justify other women from similar opportunities. That afternoon, Maya received a call from Colonel Hayes's office requesting her presence for an additional meeting. When she arrived, she found Hayes reviewing multiple files spread across her desk, creating the impression of someone weighing complex decisions involving multiple personnel. "Chen, I've been considering our conversation since this morning. The special operations training position that Patterson offered you represents an extraordinary opportunity, but I want to make sure you understand the broader implications of accepting it." Hayes explained that Maya would be the first woman assigned to develop curriculum for elite special operations training, making her a pioneer in a field that had traditionally excluded female personnel. The assignment would place her at the center of ongoing debates about women in combat roles and gender integration in military specialties.
Success in this position won't just advance your career, Hayes continued. It will open doors for other women and demonstrate capabilities that some people still question. Failure, on the other hand, could set back integration efforts by decades. The colonel's words carried the weight of institutional history and the recognition that individual performance often carried implications far beyond personal achievement. Maya understood that accepting the assignment would make her a symbol as much as a soldier, with all the additional pressure that such status entailed. "I need you to consider whether you're prepared for that level of responsibility," Hayes concluded. "Not just the professional requirements, but the symbolic burden of representing possibilities for an entire generation of female soldiers." Maya left the colonel's office with even more to consider than before. The decision about Patterson's offer had evolved from a simple career choice into a complex calculation involving personal ambition, institutional change, and social responsibility. The weight of representing something larger than herself was both daunting and inspiring, requiring careful consideration of motivations and long-term consequences. Maya spent the evening walking the perimeter of Fort Braxton, using the physical activity to process the complex decisions weighing on her mind. The base at night took on a different character, quieter, more contemplative, with only essential personnel moving between buildings under the harsh glow of security lighting. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. "Saw something on the military news feeds about Fort Braxton. Is everything okay?" Her brother's concern was touching, but also reminded Maya that her actions now had visibility beyond the base itself. Military news networks had apparently picked up the story, though she wondered how much detail they actually possessed. She called David back, finding him in his dormitory room studying for an advanced fluid dynamics exam. Their conversation provided a welcome break from military considerations, grounding Maya in the family relationships that had always anchored her sense of purpose. "You know what's interesting about engineering?" David said during their call. "The best solutions usually come from understanding forces that other people can't see. Like, everyone notices the obvious stresses on a structure, but the real breakthroughs happen when you identify the hitting pressures that nobody else is accounting for." His comment struck Maya as unexpectedly relevant to her current situation.
The obvious pressures surrounding Patterson's offer were clear: career advancement, professional recognition, increased responsibility. But the hidden forces David mentioned might be equally important. Institutional resistance, symbolic burden, the weight of representing possibilities for others. "That's actually pretty insightful advice," Maya told her brother. "Sometimes the engineering perspective applies to more than just building things." David laughed. "Mom always said you were the practical one and I was the theoretical one. But maybe we're not so different after all. We both solve problems by breaking them down into manageable pieces." Their conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from David's romantic prospects to their mother's latest concerns about neighborhood crime rates. The normalcy of family discussion provided exactly the perspective Maya needed to approach her professional decisions with clarity. The next morning brought Thompson's first day as part of Maya's training unit. She arrived early to observe his integration with the other personnel, curious to see whether his transformation from Morrison's follower into a serious soldier would prove genuine or superficial. Thompson reported at precisely 0600, his uniform immaculate and his bearing suggesting someone who had spent considerable time preparing for this opportunity. Sergeant Williams conducted the initial orientation, explaining unit standards and expectations with the thoroughness that had made him one of Fort Braxton's most respected trainers. Maya watched Thompson's interactions with other unit members throughout the morning training session. His approach was respectful but not subservient, confident but not arrogant. He asked intelligent questions and followed instructions precisely, demonstrating the kind of adaptation that suggested his request for transfer had been motivated by genuine desire for improvement rather than simple opportunism. During a break between training exercises, Private First Class Jennifer Kim approached Maya with obvious nervousness. Kim was one of the few other women in the unit, a recent recruit from Los Angeles who had shown exceptional potential in technical specialties but struggled with the physical demands of military training. "Sergeant Chen, I heard about what happened in the cafeteria, and I wanted to thank you. Some of us were having problems with Morrison's group too, but we didn't know how to handle it without making things worse." Maya had suspected that Morrison's inappropriate behavior extended beyond their direct confrontation. But Kim's confirmation added another dimension to the previous week's events. The recruit's gratitude also highlighted the symbolic importance that Colonel Hayes had emphasized. Maya's actions had implications for other women facing similar challenges. "What kind of problems?" Maya asked, keeping her voice neutral while gathering information that might be relevant to ongoing disciplinary proceedings. Kim described a pattern of harassment that included inappropriate comments during training exercises, deliberate exclusion from informal social activities, and subtle undermining of female personnel during group assignments. Morrison's crew had apparently created an environment of intimidation that affected multiple people beyond their direct confrontation with Maya. "We reported some of it through official channels," Kim continued. "But it was hard to prove anything specific, and we were worried about being labeled as troublemakers who couldn't handle normal military culture." Maya understood the impossible position that Kim and others had faced. Military culture valued toughness and self-reliance, making it difficult to report harassment without appearing weak or unable to handle the demands of service. The line between appropriate military discipline and inappropriate targeting was often blurry, especially for personnel who lacked the experience to distinguish between legitimate training stress and deliberate harassment. "You did the right thing by reporting it," Maya assured Kim, "and you're not responsible for Morrison's behavior or the consequences he's facing now." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a civilian contractor, Dr. Sarah Chen from the Pentagon's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Maya's surprise at hearing her own surname was quickly dispelled when Dr. Chen explained that she was visiting Fort Braxton to evaluate training methodologies for potential technology integration. Dr. Chen was investigating applications of virtual reality and artificial intelligence in military training scenarios, seeking to understand how emerging technologies might enhance traditional instruction methods. Her visit was part of a broader Pentagon initiative to modernize training approaches across all service branches. Staff Sergeant, I understand you've been selected for consideration in developing an advanced training curriculum, Dr. Chen said during their introduction. I'd be very interested in discussing your perspective on integrating innovative technologies with proven training methods. Maya found herself engaged in a fascinating conversation about the potential for technology to enhance rather than replace human instruction in military training. Dr. Chen's approach emphasized augmenting human decision-making rather than automating it, recognizing that the complexities of combat leadership required judgment that current artificial intelligence couldn't replicate. The most promising applications involve creating realistic scenarios that would be too dangerous or expensive to replicate in traditional training. Virtual reality can expose personnel to high-stress situations without physical risk, while AI can adapt scenarios in real time based on individual performance and decision-making patterns. The discussion sparked Maya's interest in ways that surprised her. The possibility of contributing to the development of next-generation training methods appealed to her problem-solving instincts and her desire to improve military effectiveness. It also represented another dimension of the special operations training position that Patterson had offered. Dr. Chen handed Maya her contact information along with several research papers describing current projects. If you decide to accept the training development position, I'd welcome the opportunity to collaborate on integrating some of these technologies into your curriculum design. That afternoon, Maya received an unexpected visit from Morrison himself. The former recruit appeared at her office door in civilian clothes. His military career officially ended following his court-martial conviction for insubordination and assault. His presence was both surprising and concerning, given the circumstances of their last encounter. "Sergeant Chen," Morrison began, his demeanor completely different from the aggressive confidence he'd displayed in the cafeteria. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior and thank you for handling the situation the way you did." Maya remained behind her desk, maintaining professional distance while allowing Morrison to speak. His transformation was dramatic. The swagger and entitlement had been replaced by something approaching humility, though she remained cautious about his motivations for the visit. Morrison's visit could represent authentic personal growth, or it could be an attempt to influence potential legal proceedings or future military applications. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to change what happened," Morrison said. "I just wanted you to know that losing my military career was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to confront some ugly truths about myself that I'd been avoiding for years." Maya listened to Morrison's explanation of his plans to return home to Ohio, where he intended to work with his father's construction company while pursuing education in conflict resolution and anger management. His description of future goals suggested someone who had used his military failure as a catalyst for genuine self-examination. "I hope you'll accept the special operations position," Morrison concluded. "The military needs more leaders like you. People who can handle difficult situations without losing their humanity in the process." His final comment caught Maya off guard, revealing that news of Patterson's offer had spread even to personnel who were no longer officially part of the base community. Morrison's endorsement was unexpected and, in its own way, meaningful, as confirmation that his handling of their confrontation had achieved its intended purpose. After Morrison left, Maya found herself reconsidering the various perspectives she'd received about Patterson's offer. Each conversation had added new dimensions to her understanding of what the position would require and what it might accomplish beyond her personal career advancement. Maya stood in Colonel Hayes's office 3 days later, her decision crystallized after hours of careful consideration and consultation with trusted advisors. The folder containing Patterson's special operations training offer lay closed on the colonel's desk, symbolizing the crossroads that would define the next phase of her military career. "I've made my decision about the training development position," Maya announced, her voice carrying the confidence that had served her well throughout her military service. Hayes leaned back in her chair, studying Maya's expression with the analytical gaze that had made her one of the Army's most effective leaders. "I can see from your bearing that you've given this serious thought. What's your answer?"
"I accept the assignment," Maya replied without hesitation.
But I have conditions that I'd like to discuss with Lieutenant Colonel Patterson before finalizing the details. The colonel's eyebrows rose slightly, indicating both surprise and interest in Maya's approach. Military culture rarely encouraged enlisted personnel to negotiate assignment terms, but Hayes had come to expect unconventional thinking from Maya. "What kind of conditions?" Hayes inquired, her tone suggesting genuine curiosity rather than disapproval. Maya outlined her vision for the Special Operations Training Program, incorporating elements from her conversations with Dr. Chen about technology integration, her observations about the need for ethical leadership development, and her understanding of the symbolic importance of her appointment. "I want to ensure that the curriculum includes comprehensive modules on ethical decision-making under extreme stress. Too many military failures stem from technical competence combined with moral blindness. Elite soldiers need to be elite human beings, not just elite weapons." Hayes nodded approvingly as Maya continued describing her intentions to collaborate with DARPA on virtual reality training scenarios, establish mentorship programs connecting special operations veterans with current trainees, and create assessment methods that evaluated character alongside tactical capability. "I also want to establish a pipeline for identifying and developing other women who could follow similar career paths," Maya added. "This opportunity shouldn't be seen as a unique exception, but as proof that gender-integrated elite units can exceed traditional performance standards." The colonel's smile revealed both admiration and satisfaction. "Those are exactly the kinds of conditions that demonstrate you're ready for this level of responsibility. I'll arrange a meeting with Patterson this afternoon to discuss implementation details." Later that morning, Maya conducted what would be her final training session with her current unit before transitioning to the Special Operations assignment. Thompson had been with the group for less than a week, but his integration had been remarkably smooth, validating Maya's decision to give him a second chance. During the session, Maya focused on scenario-based training that required rapid decision-making under artificial stress conditions. She watched as Thompson consistently made choices that prioritized team cohesion and mission success over personal advancement, confirming that his transformation was genuine rather than performative. Private Kim had also shown dramatic improvement since Morrison's removal from the base. Her confidence had grown noticeably, and she was beginning to demonstrate the leadership potential that Maya had suspected lay beneath her initial nervousness. "Sergeant Chen," Kim approached after the training session concluded. "I heard you're transferring to Special Operations Training Development. I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for our unit." Maya smiled, recognizing in Kim some of the same determination that had driven her own military career. "Keep pushing yourself, Kim. I have a feeling we'll cross paths again in the future, probably when you're wearing sergeant stripes yourself." The afternoon meeting with Patterson exceeded Maya's expectations in terms of both the authority she would be granted and the resources available for implementing her vision. The lieutenant colonel had clearly done extensive research on successful training innovations and was eager to support Maya's ideas for curriculum development. "Your proposal for integrating ethical leadership training with tactical instruction is particularly compelling," Patterson observed as they reviewed Maya's preliminary curriculum outline. "Special operations personnel often operate in environments where traditional command structures don't provide clear guidance, making moral reasoning absolutely critical." Maya learned that her assignment would begin with a 6-month development phase, during which she would design and test new training methodologies with volunteer personnel from various special operations units. The pilot program would then be evaluated by Pentagon officials before potential implementation across multiple military branches. "You'll have access to some of the most experienced special operations veterans in the military," Patterson explained. "These are people who've operated in every major conflict of the past 2 decades, and they're eager to contribute to training the next generation." The conversation also revealed that Maya's appointment had generated significant interest at the highest levels of military leadership. Several 4-star generals had specifically requested progress reports on the program, recognizing its potential to influence broader training policies throughout the armed forces. That evening, Maya called her family to share news of her new assignment. Elena's reaction was predictably mixed. Pride in her daughter's achievement combined with worry about the increased responsibilities and potential dangers associated with special operations training. "Promise me you'll be careful," Elena said, her maternal concern evident despite the thousands of miles between them. "I know you're strong and capable, but this sounds like it puts you in a very visible position." David's response was characteristically enthusiastic. "Maya, this is incredible! You're basically going to be designing the future of military training. Do you realize how many lives you could impact through this work?" His engineering perspective on the assignment helped Maya articulate something she'd been feeling but hadn't fully expressed: the opportunity to influence systems and processes at a scale that extended far beyond individual training sessions or unit management. "It's like you're becoming the chief engineer for human performance optimization," David continued. "Instead of designing bridges or buildings, you're designing experiences that transform people into their best possible versions of themselves." Maya spent her final week at Fort Braxton completing transition paperwork and saying goodbye to colleagues who would become important parts of her professional life. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez organized a small farewell gathering that included personnel from multiple units, creating an opportunity for informal conversations about Maya's time at the base. "You know what I'll remember most about working with you?" Gonzalez said during the gathering. "It wasn't the cafeteria incident, impressive as that was. It was watching you handle Thompson's request for transfer. A lot of people would have written him off because of his association with Morrison, but you saw potential for growth and gave him a chance to prove it." Thompson himself had requested permission to speak at the gathering, wanting to publicly acknowledge the impact that Maya's leadership had made on his military career and personal development. "Sergeant Chen taught me that integrity isn't about never making mistakes," Thompson said, addressing the assembled group. "It's about having the courage to admit when you're wrong and the determination to become better than you were yesterday." His words carried special weight because everyone present knew his history and could see the transformation he'd undergone in just 1 week under Maya's guidance. Maya's final official act at Fort Braxton was conducting Thompson's promotion ceremony. His performance during the week had been exceptional enough to warrant accelerated advancement, demonstrating that second chances could produce remarkable results when combined with proper mentorship. "This promotion represents more than recognition of your recent performance," Maya told Thompson as she pinned his new rank insignia. "It's an investment in your potential to become the kind of leader that others will want to follow." As Maya prepared to leave Fort Braxton for her new assignment, she reflected on the unexpected ways that 20 seconds in a military cafeteria had reshaped multiple lives. Morrison had found a path toward personal redemption through failure. Thompson had discovered genuine leadership potential through second chances. Kim and other personnel had gained confidence through seeing strength modeled effectively. And Maya herself had earned opportunities that would allow her to influence military training for years to come. The Special Operations Training Facility was located at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where Maya would join a team of elite instructors responsible for developing the next generation of special operations leaders. Her unique combination of combat experience, tactical expertise, and demonstrated ability to handle complex human dynamics had positioned her for success in an environment where failure could have implications far beyond individual careers. 3 months later, Maya stood before her first class of special operations candidates, looking out at faces that reminded her of her younger self, determined, capable, and eager to prove themselves worthy of the challenges ahead. Among the trainees, she noticed several women whose presence in the program validated her belief that elite military units could be strengthened through diversity rather than weakened by it. "Excellence isn't about being perfect," Maya told the assembled candidates during her opening remarks. "It's about maintaining your principles under pressure, supporting your teammates when they falter, and having the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult." As she began outlining the training program she'd developed, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a community center in Sacramento to combat operations overseas to a confrontation in a military cafeteria, each experience had contributed to her understanding of what real leadership required. The 6 recruits who had surrounded her table that evening at Fort Braxton couldn't have imagined that their challenge would ultimately create opportunities for Maya to influence thousands of future military leaders. But that's how change often happened in the military, through individual moments of courage that created ripple effects extending far beyond their immediate circumstances. Maya smiled as she watched her new students taking notes, knowing that some of them would go on to face challenges that would test everything she taught them. Her job was to ensure they were prepared not just tactically, but morally and ethically for the responsibilities that came with elite military service. 20 seconds had changed everything. Now, it was time to see what the next chapter would bring. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.